Hi. It is late for me to be reading. I don't know about you. I don't expect many people to be on, but it was a long day. We have 2 chapters left in the book, and I wanted to read. I'm in a kind of bad mood, and sometimes I think like I've done my yoga, I've done some Portuguese practice because I'm going to Brazil again soon, and I just wanted to distract my mind from things that upset me. So, Sarah, hey. So let's read. You're having a bad night or you're having some things that upset you, just get your mind off of it in a positive way. Sarah, this was yin yoga, and it's the first time I've done yin yoga. I don't know if you know it, but you have to stay in kind of uncomfortable positions longer. And it's called learning how to be comfortable with the discomfort. So, hey, Ellie. So it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It's supposed to work with like the fascia and the tendons, or I have fibromyalgia. So it's supposed to be really good for that. So it put me in a good state of mind. I wouldn't have read otherwise because it would have been a really bad day. Been a really bad day. So I tried to practice some self-care and then come on and read with some of my good friends, whether y'all are here or not. And cheers, a little naked blue machine. Yeah. It's not my favorite. Hey, Fareed. I didn't even say because I didn't think anybody would be on Discord. So I didn't even go on and say I was coming online. Thank you, Hazel. I just have to keep going through it. I mean, that's my work at my work now, instead of teaching, is about student well-being. And I'm trying to practice what I teach, not preach, but practice what I teach. It is, Fareed, almost done. I can't wait. It's not a long chapter. It is chapter 14, The Knitting Dome. Now, remember, knitting has been a big part of the story with Madame Defarge. So one would presume this is going to have something to do. And remember, the carriage has gotten away. We have left not Charles Darnay, Sidney Carton with the seamstress on the way to the gallows. And we've left all of the rest of the group in the carriage, escaping, making their flight away from everything. Still in chapter 7, book 3. Well, you better not listen, Fareed, because this is going to give it all away. Chapter 14. In that same juncture of time when the 52 awaited their fate, remember the 52 are the ones waiting to face the guillotine, Madame Defarge held darkly ominous counsel with the Vengeance and Jacques III of the revolutionary journey. Not in the wine shop did... Thanks, Fareed. I appreciate it. Hello to your family, too. Not in the wine shop did Madame Defarge confer with these ministers, but in the shed of the wood sawyer, erst a mender of roads. The Sawyer, thanks, Fareed. Sawyer, it looks like Sawyer, but I think we say Sawyer. And I think my connection is kind of laggy. Sorry about that. Sawyery about that. The Sawyer himself did not participate in the conference, but abided at a little distance, like an outer satellite who is not to speak until required, or to offer an opinion until invited. But our Defarge, says Jacques III, is undoubtedly a good Republican, eh? There is no better, the voluble Vengeance protested in her shrill notes, in France. There's none better in France. Peace, little Vengeance, said Madame Defarge, laying her hand with a slight frown on her lieutenant's lips. Hear me speak. My husband, fellow citizen, is a good Republican and a bold man. He has deserved well of the Republic and possesses its confidence. Remember, we don't mean like American Democrats and Republicans. They were the Republic of France. So when they're citizens, they're either Republicans or citizens. So they're those that are against the nobility of France. But my husband has his weaknesses, and he is so weak as to relent towards this doctor. It is a great pity, croaked Jacques III, dubiously shaking his head with his cruel fingers at his hungry mouth. It is not quite like a good citizen. It is a thing to regret. See you, said Madame, I care nothing for this doctor. He may wear his head or lose it, for any interest I have in him. It is all one to me. But the Evremond people are to be exterminated, and the wife and child must follow the husband and father. So she's ready to get rid of everybody. As they say in Tunisia, Saha. Madame Defarge. Oh, no, she has a fine head for it, said Jacques III. I have seen blue eyes and golden hair there, and they spoke charming when Samson held them up. Ogre that he was, he spoke like an epicure. Madame Defarge cast down her eyes and reflected a little. The child also, observed Jacques III with a meditative enjoyment of his words, has golden hair and blue eyes, and we seldom have a child there. It is a pretty sight. In a word, said Madame Defarge, coming out of her short abstraction, I cannot trust my husband in this manner. Notice he's not there. She's plotting without him there. Not only do I feel since last night that I dare not confide to him the details of my projects, but I also feel that if I delay, there is danger for his giving warning, and then they might escape. That must never be, croaked Jacques, and no one must escape. We have not half enough as it is. We ought to have 60 a day, like 6 people to be killed a day. 60, no, it's more, 60. 7 years ago. So I don't remember how much a score is. Do you? If you do, comment below. A score is X amount of time. In a word, Madame Defarge went on, my husband has not my reason for pursuing his family to annihilation, and I have not his reason for regarding this doctor with any sensibility. I must act for myself, therefore. Come hither, little citizen. The woodsawer, who held her in the respect and himself in the submission of mortal fear, advanced his hand to his red cap. Touching those signals, little citizen, said Madame Defarge sternly, that she made to the prisoners, you are ready to bear witness to them this very day? Aye, aye, why not? Cried the Tsar. Every day, in all weathers, from 2 to 4, always signaling, sometimes with the little one, sometimes without. I know what I know. I have seen with my eyes. He made all manner of gestures while he spoke, as if incidental imitation of some few of the great diversity of signals that he had never seen. Clearly plots, says Jacques III, transparently. There is no doubt of the jury, inquired Madame Defarge, letting her eyes turn to him with a gloomy smile. Rely on the patriotic jury, dear citizeness. I answer for my fellow jurymen. Now, let me see, said Madame Defarge, pondering again. Hey, Elizabeth Emmanuel. It's late at night for me to be reading, right? It's not my normal time to be reading. Clearly plots, transparently. There is no doubt of the jury, inquired Madame Defarge, letting her eyes turn to him with a gloomy smile. Rely upon the patriotic jury, dear citizeness. I answer for my fellow jurymen. Now let me see, said Madame Defarge, pondering again. Yet once more. Can I spare this doctor to my husband? I have no feeling either way. Can I spare him? Like, can I let the doctor off for my husband's sake? Like, let him live. We would count as one head, observed Jacques III in a low voice. We really have not heads enough. It would be a pity, I think. He was signaling with her when I saw her, argued Madame Defarge. I cannot speak of one without the other, and I must not be silent and trust the case wholly to him, this little citizen here, for I am not a bad witness. The Vengeance and Jacques III vied with each other in their fervent protestations that she was the most admirable and marvelous of witnesses. He must take his chance, said Madame Defarge. No, I cannot spare him. You are engaged at 3 o'clock. You are going to see the batch of today executed. You? The question was addressed to the woodsawer, who hurriedly replied in the affirmative, seizing the occasion to add that he was the most ardent of Republicans and that he would be, in effect, the most desolate of Republicans. And that if anything prevented him from enjoying the pleasure of smoking his afternoon pipe in the contemplation of the droll national barber. He was so very demonstrative herein that he might have been suspected, perhaps was, by the dark eyes that looked contemptuously at him out of Madame Defarge's head, of having so small individual fears for his own personal safety every hour in the day. I, said Madame, am equally engaged at the same place. After it is over, say at 8 tonight, come to me in Saint Antoine, and we will give information against these people at my section. Hi, Daniel Zhang. Hey, Animals Wing. I saw your post earlier. We're almost done. This chapter and then one more. And then we've got the book done. The woodsaw said he would be proud and flattered to attend the citizeness. The citizeness, looking at him, he became embarrassed, evaded her glance as a small dog would have done, retreated among his wood, and hid his confusion over the handle of the saw. Madame Defarge beckoned the juryman and the vengeance a little nearer to the door, and there expounded her further views of them thus. She will now be at home, awaiting the moment of his death. She will be mourning and grieving. She will be in a state of mind to impeach the justice of the Republic. She will be full of sympathy with its enemies. I will go to her. I mean, remember, we know why Madame Defarge is so angry, but Dickens has created for us an understanding and sympathy for Lucy and for Dr. Manette. So even though we can understand Madame Defarge's vengeance and quest for revenge, we don't feel as sympathetic toward her because she's been portrayed throughout the whole book as difficult, as aggressive, as angry, as bitter, as a little creepy. So our sympathies don't lie with Madame Defarge as much as they lie with Lucy and all Dr. Manette and all of those. So you have to see how the author gets you to side with one character or another. And are any of you on the side of Madame Defarge? Do you agree that all of them deserve to be destroyed? Or does it just seem extreme? Can you understand where Madame Defarge is coming from? Because she's really portrayed as this ultimate evil, this darkness where she's just eaten up with pain. Daniel, can I say your name? I don't know. I can say Daniel, but I taught students from China and they had names like this. Zheng, Zhang. Can you write it phonetically for me? I'm sorry that I'm not fluent in Chinese at all. So I'm trying to think. Zheng. No, I didn't own it. How are you doing today? Animals, I've had a bad day. So I'm glad y'all are here. And I'm going to keep reading. But now Daniel stopped me thinking about how to say his name. I willingly obey the orders of my chief, said the vengeance with alacrity, like quickly, and kissing her cheek. You will not be late? I shall be there before the commencement. And before the tumbrils arrive, be sure you are there, my soul, said the vengeance, calling after her, for she had already turned into the street before the tumbrils arrived. Madame Defarge slightly waved her hand to imply that she heard and might be relied upon to arrive in good time, and so went through the mud and round the corner of the prison wall. The vengeance and the juryman, looking after her as she walked away, were highly appreciative of her fine figure and her superb moral endowment. So they really respect her. Animals, sometimes we just have bad days, and I had hard choices to make today, and I don't like that. I don't know that you're even still there. I may just be talking to myself. There were many women at that time upon whom the time laid a dreadfully disfiguring hand, but there was not one among them more to be dreaded than this ruthless woman. So there's this reputation that Madame Defarge has, everybody's terrified of her. Now taking her way along the streets, of a strong and fearless character and shrewd sense and readiness, of great determination, of that kind of beauty which not only seems to impart to its possessor firmness and animosity, but to strike into others an instinctive recognition of those qualities. The troubled time would have heaved her up under any circumstances, but imbued from her childhood with a brooding sense of wrong and inveterate hatred of a class, opportunity had developed her into a tigress. She was absolutely without pity. If she had ever had the virtue in her, it had gone out of her. So the circumstances of her childhood have made her this bitter, bitter woman. It was nothing to her that an innocent man was to die for the sins of his forefathers. She saw not him, but them. So she doesn't see the guy that's dying. She's seeing the people that hurt her family. It was nothing to her that his wife was to be made a widow and his daughter an orphan. It was an insufficient punishment because they were her natural enemies and her prey, and as such had no right to live. To appeal to her was made hopeless by her having no sense of pity, even for herself. If she had been laid low in the streets in any of the many encounters in which she had been engaged, she would have not pitied herself, like even if she lost her life. Okay, I just saw you back. So people come and go, and I'm never sure if they're there or not there because sometimes there's numbers on the screen and then there's nobody there. And then sometimes there's no numbers on the screen and then somebody writes. So I haven't figured out what shows up. So I'll just keep reading. So Madame Defarge, we're getting a better picture of her than we've ever had, as ruthless and I like that, animals. That's great. Just we see the vengeance in her. She doesn't care about herself. She doesn't care about anything but revenge. Nor, if she had been ordered to the axe tomorrow, would she have gone to it with any softer feeling than a fierce desire to change places with the man who sent her there. Such a heart Madame Defarge carried under her rough robe, carelessly worn. It was becoming robe enough in a certain weird way, and her dark hair looked rich under her coarse red cap. Lying hidden in her bosom was a loaded pistol. Lying hidden at her waist was a sharpened dagger. I mean, she is fierce. Thus accoutred, like accoutrement, which means thus clothed, basically, and walking with the confident tread of such a character, and with the supple freedom of a woman who had habitually walked in her girlhood, barefoot and bare-legged on the brown sea sand, Madame Defarge took her way along the streets. Now, when the journey of the traveling coach, at that very moment, waiting for the completion of its load, had been planned out one last night, the difficulty of taking Miss Pross in had much engaged Mr. Lorry's attention. It was not merely desirable to avoid overloading the coach, but it was the highest importance that the time occupied in examining it and its passengers should be reduced to the utmost, since their escape might depend on the saving of only a few seconds here and there. Finally, he had proposed, after anxious consideration, that Miss Pross and Jerry, who were at liberty to leave the city, would leave it at 3:00 in the lightest wheeled conveyance known to that period. Unencumbered with luggage, they would soon overtake the coach, and passing it and preceding it on the road, would order its horses in advance and greatly facilitate its progress during the precious hours of the night. I wondered what had happened to Miss Pross and Jerry, so they're in separate carriages. Seeing in this arrangement the hope of rendering real service in that pressing emergency, Miss Pross hailed it with joy. She and Jerry had beheld the coach start, had known it was that Solomon brought, had passed some 10 minutes in tortures of suspense, and were now concluding their arrangements to follow the coach, even as Madame Defarge, taking her way through the streets, now drew nearer and nearer to the else deserted lodging in which they had held their consultation. "Now, what do you think, Mr. Cruncher?" said Miss Pross, whose agitation was so great that she could hardly speak or stand or move or live. "What do you think of our not starting from this courtyard? Another carriage having already gone from here today, it might awaken suspicion." "My opinion, miss," returned Mr. Cruncher, "is you're right. Likewise, what I'll stand by you, right or wrong." "I'm so distracted with fear and hope for our precious creatures," said Miss Pross, wildly crying, "that I'm incapable of forming any plan." "Are you capable of forming any plan, my dear, good Mr. Cruncher?" She said, "I'm so worried about Lucy that I can't think straight. Mr. Cruncher, I'm scared that we're going to cause undue notice to us if two carriages leave within a few minutes of each other. What should we do?" And let's see what Max Lachute says. "I'm watching Murder on the Orient Express." Oh, I'm so glad you're doing that. You're reading Murder for school, summer reading. Are you back to school already, or do you still have time to finish it? So I'm reading very late. This is not typical. That's why, Max, you've caught me, because I normally read like around 3:30 Central Time. But I had a long day. I had a lot of things I needed to do when I got home. I wasn't in the mood to read. And then I did my yoga session, and then that lifted me back up, lifted my mood. And so here I am. You still have time. When does school start for y'all, Max? So what do you think? What do you think Mr. Cruncher is going to do? He said, respect in a future sphere of life, miss, returned Mr. Cruncher. I hope so. Respect in any present use of this here blessed old head of mine. I think not. Would you do me the favor, miss, to take notice of 2 promises? And what is it? It is my wishes for to record in this here crisis. Oh, for gracious sakes, cried Miss Frost, still wildly crying. Record them at once and get them out of the way like an excellent man. First, said Mr. Cruncher, who was all in a tremble and who spoke with an ashy and solemn visage, them poor things well out this. Never no more will I do it. Never no more. I'm quite sure, Mr. Cruncher, returned Miss Frost, that you never will do it again, whatever it is. And I beg you not to think it necessary to mention more particularly what it is. The 13th of September, I'm assuming, because August is past. So you must be up north, because in the South, we start, like, they've already started. My schools here are at least a weekend. LSU, I think the university started either today or this week, like today's Tuesday. So they might have started yesterday. But we just start early in Louisiana. I'm not quite sure why, but we finish the end of May, like toward the middle of May, middle end. So what are these 2 up to? First, said Mr. Cruncher. No, she agreed. No, miss, returned Jerry. It shall not be named to you. Second, them poor things well out of this. Never no more will I interfere with Mrs. Cruncher's flopping, mean praying, remember? Never no more. Whatever housekeeping arrangement that may be, said Miss Frost, striving to dry her eyes and compose herself. I have no doubt it is best that Mrs. Cruncher should have it entirely under her own superintendence. Oh, my poor darling, she's still worried. I don't know what I just did with my phone there. I go so far as to say, miss, moreover, proceeded Mr. Cruncher, with a most alarming tendency to hold forth as from a pulpit, and let my words be took down and took to Mrs. Cruncher through yourself, that what my opinions respecting flopping has undergone a change, and that what I only hope with all my heart as Mrs. Cruncher might be a flopping at the present time. Now he wants her to pray for him, right? Because he's scared for his life. There. I hope she is, my dear man, cried distracted Miss Frost, and I hope she finds it answering her expectations. Forbid it, proceeded Mr. Cruncher, an additional solemnity, additional slowness, an additional tendency to hold forth and hold out, as anything what I've ever said or done should be wished on my earnest wishes for them poor creatures now. Forbid it, as we shouldn't all flop, if it was anyways convenient, to get him out of this here dismal risk. Forbid it, miss. What I say, forbid it. This was Mr. Cruncher's conclusion after a protracted but vain endeavor to find a better one. And still Madame Defarge, pursuing her way along the streets, came nearer and nearer. If we ever get back to our native land, said Miss Frost, you may rely upon my telling Miss Cruncher as much as I may be able to remember and understand of what you have said so impressively. And at all events, you may be sure that I shall bear witness to your being thoroughly in earnest at this dreadful time. Now, pray, let us think. My esteemed Mr. Cruncher, let us think. Still, Madame Defarge, pursuing her way along the streets, came nearer and nearer. So, like if you were watching this movie, it would be cutting back and forth. These two trying to figure out, what should we do? What should we do? We need to get out of here. And then cut to the street, crowded street with determined Miss Madame Defarge coming along, and the music building, right? So I really want you guys, when you read, to see these images play out in your mind, and you can recall it better. So just imagine the tense music playing, the camera panning, like a dolly in, like that, and you just see the determination on her face and the music, and the other two, what should we do? What should we do? Just cutting back and forth between. So you feel the tension building. If you were to go before and stop the vehicle and horses from coming here and were to wait somewhere for me, wouldn't that be best? Mr. Cruncher thought it might be. Where could you wait for me? Asked Miss Frost. Mr. Cruncher was so bewildered that he couldn't think of no locality but Temple Bar. Alas, Temple Bar was hundreds of miles away, and Madame Defarge was drawing near, very near indeed. By the cathedral door, said Miss Frost. Would it be much out of the way to take me in near the great cathedral door between the two towers? No, miss, answered Mr. Cruncher. Then, like the best of men, said Miss Pross, go to the posting house straight and make that change. I'm doubtful, said Mr. Cruncher, hesitating and shaking his head, about leaving you. You see, we don't know what may happen. Heaven knows we don't, returned Miss Pross. But have no fear of me. Take me in at the cathedral at 3 o'clock, or as near it as you can, and I'm sure it will be better than our going from here. I feel certain of it. There, bless you, Mr. Cruncher. Think not of me, but of the lives that may depend on both of us. So she's willing to give her life up to protect Lucy and little Lucy. This exordium and Miss Pross's two hands in quite agonized entreaty clasping his decided Mr. Cruncher. With an encouraging nod or two, he immediately went out to alter the arrangements and left her by herself to follow as she had proposed. And Lillian says, I wanted to pop in and say, you saved my life. That's my new, somebody said this on my comments. She said, best tutor friend, saving English grades, one video at a time. So if you go to my dashboard or, the main page, and then you go to the about, that's going to be the description of the channel. Saved my life with a separate piece. I am the bomb, right? 2.5 days, man, you really worked at it. I hope you remember the story. You took notes, you annotated, you read along with me. Good job, Lillian. You're going to be ready for school and kick tail. I would say something else, but I'm assuming if you're reading a separate piece, you're maybe an 8th or 9th grader. And I don't want to offend you with bad language. So they've got this plan. They're not going to let the carriage show up, and they're not going to let the carriage show up and give away the fact that something's going on. They've arranged to meet, like he's going to intercept the carriage, Mr. Cruncher. He's going to intercept the carriage, and then she's going to leave later, meet him, and they're going to leave from the cathedral. Afraid in her extreme, the having originated a precaution which was already in course of execution was a great relief to Miss Pross. The necessity of composing her appearance so that it should attract no special attention in the streets was another relief. She looked at her watch. It was 20 minutes past 2. She had no time to lose, but must get ready at once. Afraid in her extreme perturbation, like worry, of the loneliness of the deserted rooms and of half-imagined faces peeping from behind every open door in them, Miss Pross got a basin of cold water and began laving her eyes, which were swollen and red. Haunted by her feverish apprehensions, she could not bear to have her sight obscured for a minute at a time by the dripping water, but constantly paused and looked round to see that there was no one watching her. So that you've got this, y'all are funny. We've got this building tension. She's like getting ready, but she just feels like somebody's there. And we as the audience, remember that's dramatic irony, right? We in the audience know what's going on. Hurry, Miss Pross, get out of there, because this crazed Madame Defarge is on her way. And she's feeling like that nervous animal as she's washing her face and going through everything to get ready to leave. Haunted by her feverish apprehensions, she could not bear to have her sight obscured. I read that. In one of those pauses, she recoiled and cried out, for she saw a figure standing in the room. And there it's come, the music crescendos up and, it's that big moment where, like in the scary movie where the axe murderer is outside the window and we're all, right? That's where we are right now. And Lillian, I couldn't imagine reading that book in 8th or 9th grade. 11th. Lillian down here, they read it going into 9th grade. But I've noticed that all over the country, because I have people answer in, books, it just seems helter-skelter. Like there are some books that are, I think, much easier. Like the language is easy to read, but the content is very mature. And they have very young people reading it. And then vice versa. Sometimes the language is really difficult to read, but the content is simple enough. And that tends to be older kids. So I haven't figured out the scope and sequence, they call it in education, of why we read what we read at the age we read. I do recommend that as y'all go into college, maybe go back and revisit some of the books you read as a young person as you get more life experience. And you may have a completely different take. A character that you didn't like ends up being a character that you really admire and respect. So don't say just because you've read a book once, you're done with it. Because in teaching, like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, I read that multiple times, and it's become one of my favorite books. Same thing with Old Man and the Sea. Super simple book, but you understand it so much better as you get older because it's the old man and you begin to understand and connect with him. Elizabeth, I love your reads. Oh, that's so nice. School tomorrow. Get to sleep then. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. I need to go to sleep too. I've got to work tomorrow, but it's only 9 here, so not that late. Thank you, Elizabeth. Let's see. So we screamed. There's this person in the room. The basin fell to the ground, broken. So it was a glass round basin with like a sink, but they didn't have running water. And the water flowed to the feet of Madame Defarge. By strange, stern ways and through much staining blood, those feet had come to meet that water. Madame Defarge looked coldly at her and said, "The wife of Evrémonde, where is she?" Thank you, animals. It flashed upon Miss Pross's mind that the doors were all standing open and would suggest the flight. Her first act was to shut them. There were 4 in there. She then placed herself before the door of the chamber which Lucy had occupied. Madame Defarge's dark eyes followed her through this rapid movement and rested on her when it was finished. Miss Pross had nothing beautiful about her. Years had not tamed the wildness or softened the grimness of her appearance. So she's this very lean, red-haired, kind of wiry red hair, not a beauty, but Miss Pross is one of my favorites. But she too was a determined woman in her different way. And she measured Madame Defarge with her eyes, every inch, like, I've got you, lady. You're not going to get my people. She really is. I mean, all of this is about honor and caring about others more than you care about yourself. Ka-chow, I found you because of a separate piece. That seems to be something that's being read a lot. And I made a 97 for you because of you. Yay, what a good score. That was a great score. I don't know that I would have made a 97 on a separate piece. I kind of griped and complained all the way through it, if you remember. And hi, Yara. Animals, I don't think I hope she's asleep by now, but I don't think she ever comes on and watches like a whole video. She knows how to do YouTube with her phone, and or her mom's phone actually, and she'll find it. And then she wants to know why I don't say hi to her when she sees me. I said hi to you, Omi. Why you didn't say hi to me? My favorite is when she calls and she's like, I can't see your face. She's used to FaceTime and she doesn't understand when I call on the phone. It's just a phone. I can't see your face. I love that. Oh, ka-chow. Is that cat chow mix? I love that the whole class read. Like, I put it out there all the time. If you talk to your teacher and have the teacher get in touch with me on Instagram or message me on my email, I will make arrangements to like have a discussion with class over a book. Now, if it were a separate piece, we couldn't get real in depth with it because it's been too many years since I read it. But if there is a book that y'all are reading together as a class, I love engaging with students. And since I'm not teaching anymore, I miss it. And during the pandemic, I've been happy to help that way. So that's so nice. So talk to your teachers and see if we can have me come visit, virtual visit. That's the great thing about this is all this virtual stuff. Man, this is a long, I didn't think it was this long. 33 minutes. Sorry. She's measure every inch. You might, from your appearance, be the wife of Lucifer, said Miss Pross in her breathing. Nevertheless, you shall not get the better of me. I am an English woman. Madame Defarge looked at her scornfully, but still with something of Miss Pross's own perception that they too were at bay. She saw a tight, hard, wiry woman before her, as Mr. Lorry had seen in the same figure a woman with a strong hand in the years gone by. She knew full well that Miss Pross was the family's devoted friend. Miss Pross knew full well that Madame Defarge was the family's malevolent enemy. Isn't that a good word? Malevolent. Like malevolence in... Oh, which Disney movie is malevolence? Sleeping Beauty? Shoot, I forget. On my way yonder, said Madame Defarge, with a slight movement in her hand towards the fatal spot where they reserve my chair and my knitting for me. I'm come to make my compliments to her in passing. I wish to see her. I know that your intentions are evil, said Miss Pross, and you may depend upon it. I'll hold my own against them. Each spoke in her own language. Neither understood the other's words. Both were very watchful and intent to deduce from look and manner what the unintelligible words meant. So Madame Defarge speaks in French, Miss Pross speaks in English, but there's an understanding between them. You're my enemy, and I'm not letting you have what you want. If those eyes of yours were bed wenches, returned Miss Pross, and I was an English four-poster, they shouldn't loose a splinter of me. No, you wicked foreign woman, I am your match. Madame Defarge was not likely to follow those idiomatic remarks in detail, but she so far understood them as to perceive that she was set at naught. Woman, imbecile and pig-like, said Madame Defarge, frowning. I take no answer from you. I demand to see her. Either tell her that I demand to see her, or stand out of the way of the door and let me go to her. This with an angry explanatory wave of her right arm. I little thought, said Miss Pross, that I should ever want to understand your nonsensical language. But I would give all I have, except the clothes I wear, to know whether you suspect the truth or any part of it. Neither of them for a single moment released the other's eyes. Madame Defarge had not moved from the spot where she stood when Miss Pross first became aware of her, but she now advanced one step. I am a Briton, said Miss Pross. I am desperate. I don't care an English tuppence for myself. I know that the longer I keep you here, the greater hope there is for my ladybird. I'll not leave a handful of that dark hair upon your head if you lay a finger on me. She's a tough one. I love her. But her courage was that of emotional nature, that it brought the irrepressible tears into her eyes. This was a courage that Madame Defarge so little comprehended as to mistake for weakness. So, I don't know if any of you are like that. When you're really angry, you cry. I hate that about myself. Like I'm really, really, truly angry, and the tears come, and then that just makes you look. The other people misunderstand it and think you're scared or that you're weak, and that's what Madame Defarge. She sees Miss Pross crying, and she's like, "Oh, I got this. There's nothing to it." Perhaps, no. Where is it? Weakness. Ha ha, she laughed. You poor wretch. What are you worth? I address myself to that doctor. Then she raised her voice and called out, Citizen Doctor, wife of Evrémonde, child of Evrémonde. Any person but this miserable fool answered to the Citizeness Defarge. Perhaps the following silence, perhaps some latent disclosure in the expression of Miss Pross's face, perhaps a sudden misgiving apart from either suggestion whispered to Madame Defarge that they were gone. 3 of the doors she opened swiftly and looked in. Those rooms are all in disorder. There's been hurried packing. There are odds and ends upon the ground. There is no one in that room behind you. Let me look. Never, said Miss Pross, who understood the request as perfectly as Madame Defarge understood the answer. If they are not in that room, they are gone and can be pursued and brought back, said Madame Defarge to herself. As long as you don't know whether they are in that room or not, you are uncertain what to do, said Miss Pross to herself. And you shall not know that if I can prevent your knowing it. And know that or not know that, you shall not leave here while I can hold you. I have been in the streets from the first. Nothing has stopped me. I will tear you to pieces. But I will have you from that door, said Madame Defarge. We are alone at the top of a high house in a solitary courtyard. We are not likely to be heard, and I pray for bodily strength to keep you here, while every minute you are here is worth 100,000 guineas to my darling, said Miss Pross. Madame Defarge made at the door. Miss Pross, on the instinct of the moment, seized her around the waist in both her arms and held her tight. It was in vain for Madame Defarge to struggle and to strike. Miss Pross, with the vigorous tenacity of love, this reminds me of Harry Potter, that her love for Lucy, for her little ladybird, gives her superhuman strength. Kind of like the mother of Harry Potter. He gets the zigzag, whatever he gets on his forehead, because his mother protected him, because her love was greater than the evil that Madame Defarge brings, and that not Snape, that's not right, whatever the bad guy's name is, in either case. I love to say, but I have to go every minute spend with you. Oh, animals, that's so nice. Get some sleep. I hope tomorrow's a great day. Thank you for joining me and being so supportive. So this love that Miss Pross has just gives her this superhuman strength. Madame Defarge made at the door. Miss Pross, on the instinct of the moment, seized her around the waist in both her arms and held her tight. It was in vain for Madame Defarge to struggle and to strike Miss Pross with the vigorous tenacity of love, always so much stronger than hate. There's that line. Clasped her tight and even lifted her from the floor in the struggle that they had. The two hands of Madame Defarge buffeted and tore her face, but Miss Pross, with her head down, held her around the waist and clung to her with more than the hold of a drowning woman. Soon Madame Defarge's hands ceased to strike and felt at her encircled waist. "It is under my arm," said Miss Pross in smothered tones. "You shall not draw it. I'm stronger than you. I bless heaven for it. I'll hold you till one or other of us faints or dies." Madame Defarge's hands were at her bosom. Miss Pross looked up, saw what it was, struck at it, struck out a flash. Remember, in her bosom is the gun. Hey, de la Mare. We're right in the middle of the exciting. These two old ladies, one full of hate and one full of love, are in like deadlock battle, fighting to protect Lucy as she tries to escape, fighting to catch her, to kill her, to get her ultimate vengeance. That's right where you joined us, de la Mare. So there's the gun, and Miss Pross recognizes there's a gun. Miss Pross looked up, saw what it was, struck at it, struck out a flash and a crash, and stood alone, blinded with smoke. All this was in a second. As the smoke cleared, leaving an awful stillness, it passed out on the air like the soul of the furious woman whose body lay lifeless on the ground. In the first fright and horror of her situation, Miss Pross passed the body as far from it as she could, and round. So Miss Pross lived, and Madame Defarge is down, dead, because it says the body lay lifeless, and ran down the stairs to call for fruitless help. Happily, she bethought herself of the consequences of what she did in time to check herself and go back. It was dreadful to go in at the door again, but she did go in, and even went near it to get the bonnet and other things she must wear. These she put on, out on the suitcase, first shutting and locking the door and taking away the key. Animals, you're supposed to go to bed. She then sat down on the stairs a few moments to breathe and to cry, and then got up and hurried away. By good fortune, she had a veil on her bonnet, or she could hardly have gone along. So she's so emotional, and she's got a covering on her face on her big bonnet so that people don't see how upset she is. By good fortune, too, she was naturally so peculiar in appearance as not to show disfigurement like any other woman. She needed both advantages, for the marks of gripping fingers were deep in her face, and her hair was torn, so she's got bruises where Madame Defarge went after her. Hastily composed with unsteady hands, was clutched and dragged 100 ways. In crossing the bridge, she dropped the door key in the river. Arriving at the cathedral some minutes before her escort and waiting there, she thought, what if the key were already taken in the net? What if it were identified? What if the door were opened and the remains discovered? What if she were stopped at the gate, sent to prison, and charged with murder? In the midst of these fluttering thoughts, the escort appeared, took her in, and took her away. "Is there any noise in the street?" she asked him. "The usual noises," Mr. Cruncher replied, and looked surprised by the question and by her aspect. "I don't hear you," said Miss Pross. "What did you say?" It was in vain for Mr. Cruncher to repeat what he said. Miss Pross could not hear him. "So I'll nod my head," thought Mr. Cruncher, amazed. "At all events, she'll see that." And she did. "Is there any noise in the streets now?" asked Miss Pross again presently. Again, Mr. Cruncher nodded his head. "I don't hear it." "Gone deaf in an hour?" said Mr. Cruncher, ruminating with his mind much disturbed. "What's come to her?" "I feel," said Miss Pross, "as if there's a flash and a crash, and that crash was the last thing I should ever hear in this life." "Blessed if she ain't in a strange condition," said Mr. Cruncher, more and more disturbed. "What can she be taking to keep her courage up?" "He thinks she's drunk. Hark, there's the roll of them dreadful carts. You can hear that, miss?" "I can hear," said Miss Pross, seeing that he spoke to her. "Nothing. Oh, my good man, there was first a great crash, and then a great stillness, and that stillness seems to be fixed and unchangeable, never to be broken any more as long as my life lasts. If she didn't hear the roll of those dreadful carts, now very nigh their journey's end," said Mr. Cruncher, glancing over her shoulder, "it's my opinion that indeed she never will hear anything else in this world." And indeed, she never did. So she's gone deaf from all of this. Oh my gosh, one chapter left. And the last chapter is called "The Footsteps Die Out Forever." What does it mean? And Surya, I've been trying to get to see you live. Well, here you are to tell you that I got a 96. Oh, on your IGCSEs. That's awful. And did I say awful or awesome? That's wonderful. I'm really so happy for you. I know what a big deal that is. Now, it looks like Surya, but I have a daughter, Soraya. Is it the same? Is it this, or is Surya? I want to say it right. Congratulations to you. I'm so glad you caught me live and you got just in time because I'm done. We have one chapter left. And those of you that are new to me, it's a short chapter too. So tomorrow we'll finish it and we will cry. All right. I will cry. And I love Miss Pross. Isn't she great? But those of you that are new to me know that our next, and you want to join for the whole thing, our next book is 1984. I have purchased from Amazon a Signet Classic. It's this red one. It's got the big eyeball. It's got a black spine. So Signet Classic, and it was on Amazon.com. So, in Sanskrit. So Soraya is a constellation star. My other daughter, Shamsi, in Arabic, it means the same thing, sunshine. She's my little sunshine. So, see, we're connected. Well, guys, I read really late. That's not typical for me, but it was fun to do it. Had a lot of people come on. 46-minute was this read. We are, I don't know, I haven't checked today. We're close to 13,000. Let's see how many subscribers we have these days. I was practicing Portuguese today because I'm going to Brazil later. It was written in the stars, Surya. I agree. I'm going to Brazil later this month, so I was practicing my Portuguese, and we are at 12,900 and something. I have to look at my app to see it. So if you haven't subscribed already, do it and get us over to 13,000 so we can keep growing and keep growing. You don't have to. It's just a request. I don't get anything out of it. I just like the excitement of seeing us grow and knowing that people are still enjoying reading along. And I have so many requests. I'm so glad I finally got Tale of Two Cities, just one more chapter, but almost done. And then 1984, I'm kind of dreading 1984 a little bit. I feel ill-prepared for it, but I do have the teacher's guide for 1984 so that if I'm not sure, I can kind of read through and get some guidance on it because I don't want to just look ill-prepared and like an idiot when I read. Do you guys feel like that when you go to school? I don't want to be ill-prepared and embarrassed in front of the teacher. So keep reading. Subscribe if you haven't done it. Come to my Discord. Join us on Discord because I usually say I'm going to go live read. Tonight I did not because it was so late and I didn't want people to, think they were obligated because a lot of my Discord people have been with me for a long time. If you want to send me a message, go to Instagram. I've got Best Tutor Friend there and you can send me a message. I have tried to respond to every message I've ever gotten. The only time you don't get a response from me is I didn't get the message. I just got lost in the shuffle. I appreciate you guys. I hope you're doing well. If you have a bad day like I had today, if you've watched me all the way to the end, you knew from the beginning that it was a bad day. But I made the choice to take care of myself, to do YouTube, to do yoga and YouTube. That could be a new channel, yoga and YouTube. I did some Portuguese. I did things to be a better me so that even if life and time and heart is broken and hard and sad and frustrating and disappointing and confusing, which some days are, all those things, just take a breath, center yourself, do that soft belly breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, some good yoga stretches, some good, tell yourself some good affirmations. This world is beautiful. I'm beautiful. School is beautiful. That person that's terrible to me is beautiful. Put some positive energy out there and just keep going and keep reading. And I will read to you next time. See ya.